Good morning and welcome to another edition of Research Fantasy Presents our MLB DFS game breakdown for Saturday, June 3rd, 2017. The reason we are not going to do our pitcher picks and hitter picks today is just because A, we're getting a little bit of a late jump on things and starting this video about 2 hours, maybe even less than 2 hours before the afternoon slate starts. So I don't really want to compress your time, and truthfully it's about a 2-to-1 ratio in terms of teams playing on the morning to the night slate. So with more of the money being on the night slate, I'd rather take a focus there. We'll break from what we usually do and we will go to look at every game by game. I did this on short slates in the NBA. I think a lot of DFS players who watched found that to be a more interesting route to take. Obviously, I don't have the time to do, 9 to 15 game by game breakdowns, but when it's just 5, I can do it. Let's start off with Pittsburgh visiting the New York Mets. We've got Robert Jesselman on the mound. We've got Tyler Glasnow on the mound. This is actually a great game to target. I think Glasnow started the year with some really weird stats. He was giving, the WOBA was just through the roof, but he was like mid-teens in fly ball rate and hard contact. That has regressed significantly to the point where now his hard contact, I know against lefties, is now over 30%. So from about his 5th to his 13th start here, we've now talked about his hard contact rate doubling. Gotta like those lefty Mets tonight, playing on the home field. Lucas Duda has been swinging a pretty hot stick. Always got to look at Conforto, Bruce, Walker, Granderson. Those would be the guys that I'm looking at in this game. And the Mets are a team that can definitely go lefty heavy very, very easily. On the flip side of things, Robert Jesselman has been a guy that, he was one of those Kevin Gossman-esque sleeper picks coming into the year. Things really haven't panned out for him just yet. I don't mind getting exposure to guys like Josh Bell, Josh Harrison, Adam Frazier are all players that I will have some pieces of on the night slate tonight. I think that'll work out well. Let's move on to Houston at Texas. Big bump for the Houston team. They're sending Lance McCullers to the mound tonight. Opposing him will be Andrew Cashner. Hasn't been an all-around train wreck, but still not very good. Has actually seemingly done a little bit better at this stadium than away, but I'm not buying that tonight against an Astros team that can definitely put up some runs. I heavily favor the Astros, and I'm sure not only does Vegas, but most daily fantasy players will as well, because they continue to turn out these games with double-digit run production. They're already always immensely popular. I expect that to be the case tonight. I don't hate having some exposure to the Rangers. I don't think I would go overboard. I would mostly be looking at, when we're talking about pitchers with high strikeout rates, I think you also end up talking about the home run ball being in play. So I don't mind trying to one-off with guys like maybe Mike Napoli, Nomar Mazara, maybe Rougned Odor, Shin-Soo Choo, but definitely Joey Gallo is a guy that jumps off the page to me tonight as being a boom or bust tournament option. We'll probably see low ownership because McCullers is a very good pitcher, but if he's able to grab a hold of one, and number one, he's low owned, and number two, the position is not performing very well, then you've got yourself a definite winner. Let's go to Baltimore. David Price on the mound for the Red Sox against Dylan Bundy. Bundy's been pretty solid this year. In fact, he's actually only had one game where he hasn't posted a quality start. This is the type of game, though, I could see Boston coming through, and I've been vociferous between the videos and the articles I write that Boston is the kind of team who, if they're facing junk ball pitcher A that just got called up from single A ball in an emergency situation, they'll be 33% owned across the board, 1 to 9 in the lineup, or 8 depending where they're playing, and they'll go on to produce 1 run and kill everybody's lineups. Put them against someone who they should not have good success against. Now you're talking about a situation where they'll put up 7 or 8 runs. We saw this against Irvin Santana earlier in the year, and as much as I want to like Dylan Bundy tonight, I can see the same thing happening to him there. David Price, still too early to tell what things are going to look like. Went 5 innings, 4 strikeouts, gave up 3 earned runs against the White Sox. White Sox against left-handed pitching, though, not a good matchup. We saw that with Chris Sale getting beaten around pretty heavily, so it's not shocking. We do know that this Orioles lineup is a big-time boom or bust situation. I would be looking at guys. I'm not going to go heavy on the Orioles, but I don't mind grabbing exposure to guys like Trey Mancini, Manny Machado, Chris Davis, Mark Trumbo. Those would be the guys I would focus on there. Moving on to Minnesota at the Angels. Again, this is an interesting situation because we could be talking a 1-0 game, or we could be talking about a game where the Twins win 11-0. I do think the Twins have a good chance of winning this game. Irvin Santana he's got to be the early front runner for not MVP, but Cy Young Award in the AL. He's been masterful. He's not a high strikeout guy. I know for a fact the price on DraftKings is absolutely ridiculous. There's no way he should be priced in the 11K because he just doesn't have that strikeout upside. I like him because the Angels lineup is just not really threatening at this point. I mean, you know what, they could barely get anything done until the late innings, and Kyle Gibson was out of the game already. When you're making Kyle Gibson look like a legitimate ace, you know something's wrong with your team. So I'm pretty well off all of the Angel bats tonight. I think I'm willing to look at Santana on FanDuel. I really haven't looked just solo at the late slate on DraftKings to see, and it could be his price is so high just because McCullers maybe is the only other acceptable pitching option, but Matt Shoemaker could be in for a good game. The Twins are a solid offense, as we saw last night. I mean, they lit J.C. Ramirez up, who I think he's a fair enough pitcher. I'd put him at maybe slightly above average. You know, Shoemaker's supposed to be their ace, has not looked the part this year. Did rattle off 3 straight solid outings before getting shellacked by the Marlins. I don't hate him as a tournament play because, come on, especially on a site like DraftKings, there's only 10 pitchers. There's already like 4 or 5 guys that I already don't want to have any part of. So you can't just continue to whittle that list down, or else you're in real trouble if one of these guys pops off. So I have some exposure to Shoemaker. I'd be looking at guys like Sano, Grossman, Kepler, the usual suspects here. Buxton, if he can get on base, is always a bit of a threat to steal, so that's a good piece of upside with his game. He's got some power as well. I don't hate it, especially where he's cheap in the industry. Moving on to the final game of the night, we've got Alex Cobb going on the mound for the Rays, taking on Sam Gaviglio of the Seattle Mariners. Gaviglio's made 3 starts. He is definitely not a strikeout pitcher, notching only 2 1-1 in those first 3 starts. One of the games was in Colorado, and he gave up 5 runs. Other than that, 1 run, no runs. Can't imagine that that's going to be the situation tonight for him. I like taking some pieces of this Rays team. I'll, of course, be looking first and foremost at our lefties. Kiermaier's on a very, very, very scary streak right now. He's just knocking everything out of the park that he can touch. So it's hard to overlook him. We know the upside for guys like Corey Dickerson, Colby Rasmus, even though he just hasn't really been able to connect. Although I do think he did go deep last night. He did. So, I mean, he's got 7 home runs on the year. This lineup tends to put up enough runs that their guys, all in all, end up having some pretty strong scores, so I don't hate the exposure there. On the Seattle side of things, Danny Valencia had a big, big, big game last night. He's cheap across the industry. The bat seems to be starting to come alive for him a little bit. Alex Cobb, a middling pitcher at best. Don't hate that. Obviously, we could look at our usuals like Robbie Cano, Kyle Seager doing a little bit better. Taylor Motter came through with the big grand slam last night. I don't even know where they have him at. I'm looking at, okay, he's in outfield now. I think he was in shortstop before, but he'd been extremely cold before last night. If you believe he could be a good option, Jared Dyson, someone I don't hate because he's got the speed too if he gets on base. Not always a guy in the lineup, so that will about break it down. If you're asking me who my favorite plays on a whole are, I mean, I'm probably going to have a good amount of exposure at pitcher to McCullers. Good Lord, that's like it. I have a lot of McCullers apparently tonight. I'll toss in some Shoemaker. I just have to see how the lineup builds go to see whether I'm going to risk it with a guy like Santana at that price. I think it's still a little early on price to take the risk. I'm off Jessamine. I'm off Glass now. I'm off Gaviglio. Maybe a little bit of Bundy exposure because of the upside we've seen out of him this year. And that's going to pretty much wrap that up in terms of hitting. I like Pittsburgh and the Mets. I like Houston. I like Tampa Bay. I like Seattle. So I'll sprinkle some Red Sox ownership in there. Like I said, at least his price, $3,100 on FanDuel. That's far too cheap for Kiermaier getting a good lineup position and hitting against a good pitcher. He may be my favorite player on this slate. All right, thanks for watching. Make sure to head over to researchfantasy.com, see what we've got going on over there. If you like what you saw, give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like us on Facebook at Research Fantasy. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. And join us again tomorrow.